Hello, fellow humans, and welcome back to Beyond Words. The following is a conversation with Dr. Anita Collins. This one's from the archives. She's an award-winning educator and author of The Music Advantage. You might know her from her TED Ed video on how playing an instrument benefits the brain. But what you'll hear today goes even deeper into the details. If you're an SLP or a parent wondering how to support child language development from infancy through school years, this episode is for you. Dr. Collins shares powerful, practical, and accessible insights into why sound is like superfood for the brain, how music learning builds the foundation for reading and speech, and why even simple things like singing lullabies or clapping games can change the trajectory of your child's development. So whether you're a caregiver, teacher, therapist, or just someone who wants to raise a more connected, expressive human being, I think you'll walk away from this one with a lot of practical ideas. This is Beyond Words. So what lies beyond the words we speak? Tune in and find out. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this episode, The Music-Speech Connection, How Music Shapes Speech and Language with Dr. Anita Collins. And a special welcome to those joining us from the Speech Therapy PD channel on YouTube. This course is 1 hour and will be offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. My name is Garrett Oyama. I'm the host for this series. I'm an SLP, a musician, and a research coordinator with an interest in interdisciplinary collaboration. And before we get started, just a few items to mention. Just a couple of disclosures. I'm the host of this podcast and I get compensation from Speech Therapy PD, as does Dr. Collins for this episode. And she's also the author of the fantastic book, The Music Advantage, which we will talk about a little bit today. And just a little bit about our amazing guest today. Dr. Anita Collins is an award-winning educator, researcher, and writer specializing in brain development and music learning. She's internationally recognized for her work in translating scientific research into practical applications for parents, teachers, and students. She authored The Music Advantage, which explores how learning music can enhance various aspects of a child's development, including language abilities, social skills, concentration, and memory. And she also collaborated with TED Ed to create the widely viewed animation, How Playing an Instrument Benefits Your Brain, which illustrates the neurobiological benefits of music education. So without further ado, Dr. Collins, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Welcome. It's fantastic to be here.
Yeah, it's so awesome to meet you. Yeah, and just like going over your bio, you do so much. Like you're an author, you're a researcher, you're a teacher, you're a speaker. Yeah, what don't you do? Right. So what do you see kind of like as sort of the driving force behind all of these things? What's your mission in your work?
My mission's very simple. I want to have a meaningful, ongoing quality music education for every child, and making sure that it's not just about every child having access to it or the opportunity to do it. It's actually that it's a core part, a foundational part of their education. And for me, I use the research to help people to look beyond the myths and the misunderstandings they have about music education and go, actually, it's beneficial for all of the students' human development. And it grows their brain in such a way that it makes sure that they're at their heightened state to go and do whatever they want to do really well, rather than the current sort of myth is, well, you study music to be a musician. Like it's a direct line between one and the other. And if you're not talented or you can't pay for it, then you're not meant to do music. And I'm trying to bust that narrative open with some research, but also with a lot of specific kind of advocacy around that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think our missions really align there. You know, as a musician and SLP, that's what I've been trying to do. And I've been talking to a lot of different people in the music research space on this podcast, and it's just become more and more clear that music education is so overlooked. When I was growing up, it was becoming like, oh, that's just extracurricular. We don't really need it. They're cutting funding for a lot of these programs. And you mentioned this analogy in the book of it's kind of like a superfood, sonic input being sort of nutrition for the brain. So yeah, I align with your mission. So I absolutely love the book. It's really full of some brilliant analogies, and I think a lot of them are super relevant for a lot of the SLPs here. And I just want to pull out a couple of relevant quotes. Maybe the first one that one I was just talking about, you say in the book that sound is food for the infant's brain. Can you describe what you mean?
Basically, it's the idea that babies and toddlers are taking in so much information through their ears. It's their largest information gathering sense at that age. And indeed, that's actually true of all of our adult life as well. It takes in more information than the other senses do. And I think we neglect it a lot of the time. We just think, sound is sound, but it's not. It's information for a baby in particular. And they need to make sure that they have really rich sound environments, just like superfoods. They have to have the ones that really, really help them to develop their language skills in particular, but also their movement skills. Babies start to understand how to move by hearing beat and by hearing it through their ears and then talking to their motor cortices and going, okay, if I want to move to this beat, what do I actually have to do? And if I have to predict when the beat's going to occur, what's the movement I do beforehand? It's so important for their development of their motor cortices, their auditory and their visual, so that their sensory triangle comes together to actually work as powerfully as it can, because that's the foundation of all learning that comes after that. And that's why it's so important to do it at such a young age. And also when I see students who are older and I understand how they understand the world through their ears, they're really struggling because that part of their sensory processing triangle has not been developed as much as it should be. So I just think it's an overlooked area of education, an overlooked area of brain development. Well, not overlooked now, we've got so many people working on it, and something that I just want to get out into the public domain. I want people to understand this research so they can make really good decisions as parents, really great decisions as teachers, and so that as we come into adulthood, we understand why our hearing is so important and the way we process sound is so different from everybody else.
Yeah, I love that. And it is so common to hear, I was just talking with a parent before this in a speech therapy session, and they're like, oh, there's something wrong with the mouth that's creating the problem with the speech. Like, what's wrong with the mouth? And it's these they're really this idea of these modular things like reading that has to do with vision and you're looking at something, and speech that has to do with your mouth movements, and you're talking about motion that all has to do with your body and your your somatosensory system. But really hearing and sound, well, everything's all connected, but that plays such a huge role in all of these developing systems.
Yeah.
And I think
and
you make a point.
The first role, it's like we often speech, and if you think speech and mouth, that's the very last place it comes out. It's got to go through here first and then get processed and then finally get to this bit. So that's why I'm trying to get people to understand the research so that they think differently about any problem that it comes up with. Even when it comes to movement problems or processing problems, it's a lot to do with how we're processing sound.
I loved this. You use this analogy in the book of like an iTunes library that the child is creating. Yeah. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yeah, it was. So this is the process of how we understand speech sounds. And again, it's understanding it's a cycle that we go through. And the first thing is that the sound say, for example, we see on a page a T and an H. And the very next thing that happens is not our mouth moving, is not anything else. It's our brain hearing the sound that a T and an H makes. So that's where the iTunes library is. It's all the language sounds are sitting up in there. And the fascinating part is how many repetitions does it take to sort of make a file in your iTunes library? And every child is different and every brain is different. But what they do is they see the T and the H. The very next thing is they hear the sound of that in their iTunes library. That iTunes library talks to the body to go, okay, how do we make that sound out of our mouth? It gets the mouth to move itself. So it goes, this is what I have to do. A T and an H is fascinating because it's tongue up the top and air has to go through, and then you have to know what the next sound is afterwards to make it make sense. And then it makes the sound. But as soon as the sound comes out, it goes back into the ears and back into the iTunes library and goes, did that match the sound that I heard before? And if it did, it goes, tick, great job. And if it doesn't match, it goes, no, not quite, let's try that again. Which is why it explained to me when I had my daughter why she would repeat a sound for a week. Like one sound would just go over and over and over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And then the next week she'd go to another one. But what she was doing was trying to make this cycle happen so that the very next time she has to get that sound out, she knows exactly how to do it. So it just explains behaviors that we've seen, which is really important to do. But I also think it explains a lot more about when things go wrong, when we're having trouble with reading, when we're having trouble with speech. It's about what starts here and what's in the iTunes library.
It kind of reminds me of when babies also, bringing back this connection with all the system. It's like when they're trying to learn how to grab for something or point, they kind of like go all over the place, and they're sort of randomly guessing, and based on the feedback they're getting, because they want to reach this toy or whatever it is, they're sort of fine tuning their motor programming so that they can more accurately get to the target that they want to get to.
Yes.
And yeah, it really helped me understand the point too, that when you have kind of a different file in your iTunes library, if you can, that can be the reason why you're not pronouncing something correctly. It's like, it can be a hearing issue, or a segmenting issue. Sorry.
Yeah, I often think about it as sometimes the file could be a little bit corrupted, so it just doesn't sound quite right. Or alternatively, and this is what we are starting to understand with dyslexia, is that the file has been filed incorrectly. Like it's there, but it's been given a different name, or it's in a different filing cabinet or something like that. And so retrieving it when you've seen it can be a little bit of a problem. Yeah, so for me, it just works. And again, when I talk to researchers, they explain it to me in the scientific way, and then I turn around and go, so do you mean it's like this? And they go, yeah, that's a way to look at it. And I like having those ideas because, as you've said, they stick. Those ideas stick for you when you read them and go, that explains something.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I think you mentioned the point of bilinguals too, who, when they're when you're young, you can hear all of the different contrasts between the sounds. You're sort of, developing your files, I suppose. And then like at some point when one of the sounds becomes relevant to you in your native language, like let's say it's Japanese, like a native Japanese speaker starts to not hear the difference between R and L, so that they only have one file, let's say for that sound. So it's, I just thought that it helped explain that in a way that was very clear.
Yeah, see, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping, is it would help you then jump on board and go, oh, this one explains some other thing.
Yeah. What do you think now about kind of getting back to this understanding that our sonic world is like nutritious for the developing mind? What do you think about kids' homes now? We talk about this in some capacity as speech therapists, but how there's kind of increasingly more speech like that's not connected to an interaction. It's like maybe coming from a TV or a device, or there's a lot of digital noise, things like that. It's becoming so ubiquitous. What do you think about that? And
yeah, it's such a big thing. So the world has never been as noisy as it is now, and our brains and our auditory systems weren't built for this. So we can't evolve that quickly to be able to go, now we can manage this much sound. So what our brain is doing is going, it's just too much sound, so I'm going to screen it out. I can't cope with this much information, because our ears never turn off. It doesn't matter what we do, we can't turn them off. So they have to keep processing all the time. So the brain then has to go, hang on a second, I need to rationalize the amount of energy I'm using on processing all of this sound. So I'm actually going to tell the auditory processing to stop processing, to stop hearing all the sounds, unless it's a sound that indicates danger or something has changed. So this is why when I'm in schools, I see a lot of kids who just are what looks like zoned out. And it's because there's so much sound in the classroom. And the other part, as you mentioned, is we're getting a lot of sound from devices. Now, sound on recorded devices has been compressed, and there's a whole bunch of auditory information that is missing from it. So, and we saw this very, very clearly during COVID when we were doing online learning, is that the kids were having to work incredibly hard to hear all the sounds. And if they sort of ran out of cognitive energy, they would just turn off. So this is why we have such short periods of time online. Same thing with teachers. When we were trying to teach, we were using so much more energy to do it, because we had to change our voice. We had to go further up and further down. The melody or prosody of our voice had to change significantly in order to teach effectively. So I think we have an issue that there are a lot of sounds in houses, especially when we see kids who've grown up at home, haven't attended sort of a preschool or sort of any preschool education, then come to school and it's like, whoa, I'm having to process all these different sounds. So it's very tricky for them. It is impeding on their language development, because if the brain starts going, there's just too much information, when speech comes in there, it's going to start not listening to it. And what the brain needs, as we all understand, is it needs speech inputs, particularly in the first 5 years of life, in order to make sure that the students can then speak the language effectively. And then the step I often take is then they be able to read the language effectively. if they can't hear it in the first place, that whole cycle has stopped. And so I think helping parents understand that it doesn't have to be a silent environment. If anything, that's not good either. But we need to think about the amount of sounds that are going on in the household, and particularly if things are constant, like if the television is left on. Just background noise, that's becoming background noise that a baby is having to fight with to hear and understand all the different sounds, particularly separating out speech and noise, which is that first step that the brain takes. So I think we have to be even more conscious now than we ever have been about the sound environments that we select, that we allow, and that it has a significant impact on a child's speech and reading development as well. And the last thing I would say to that is the need for, and I'm sure all of the people listening deal with this as well, the need for the whole face when we're teaching speech. And so much of what happened in COVID, we covered up half the face. If anything, we covered up the most important half of the face. And even now, if we're speaking to a child, but we're looking at a device, which is a really common thing that parents do, the child is not getting that whole face information, and they need to get it in order to progress on that speech development journey that they have in the first 5 years, particularly.
Yeah. And just like you're mentioning, everything is connected, right? And when I was speaking with Nina Kraus about this, she talks about how she was studying these individual neurons that even at the level of individual neurons in the brain that are processing auditory inputs, they change when they have a visual input with it. And like they change their firing, which is so incredible. But we're really processing context and everything in this very rich way. And so, it has a huge impact, like all of the stuff that's happening in the homes, like not looking at your kid, instead looking at the device, like you're mentioning, having the TV on in the background. It's like, I think you put it as like you're tuning out your kind of what should be signal, speech should be signal, is now getting processed as noise. So you're like tuning out more speech as noise, which is definitely, and we saw that in the numbers too. The communication disorder rates went up, like there was like 110% increase during that time. So it was huge,
Absolutely,
hugely impactful. Yeah. So, and now, like, one thing we there's definitely this problem, but you have been so great at showing us what potential solutions might be. One being music. And I was wondering if we could maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about how music and language are related.
Yeah. So I very specifically look at music learning in whatever that looks like. And a lot of the time we use the word music, but we don't add the second word, which is it music listening? Is it music learning? Is it music experience? So I very specifically look at music learning because the research that I look into has shown that learning a musical instrument, or learning in how to sing, or learning for early childhood, doing all the appropriate early childhood instruments, for example, has a profound benefit on that sensory triangle, that auditory, visual, and motor that I was talking about, in their social interaction, their executive function. It just basically helps the brain to work as effectively as it can. And to me, in a world that is louder than it's ever been, and we are dealing with less speech, particularly in those first 5 years, music as learning as part of the journey of development has never been more important, because it allows the brain, or it forces the brain in a way, to connect the sensory triangle. That's the first big thing. It allows the brain to hear and process nuances in sound. So I'm sure, I don't know if Nina brought it up, but the three hardest consonants are b, d, and g. They're the ones she uses for her research. And the ability to hear the nuance between those three is so important and shows us how far the auditory processing has developed. So having music learning as part of a complementary experience to speech and reading development is something that I'm really pushing for in those first 5 years of life, rather than, again, the current narrative. And part of what I've had to do is look at what do people currently believe. First of all, learning music is for kids who can, or parents who can pay for it, as opposed to it should be part of every developmental cycle for a child. It should only be with kids that are interested. And I feel like every child is interested in music from the beginning of life, because it's one of the primary processing networks that are working from birth. It's there for a reason. And then the other part is it's often done outside of, say, a school or a learning environment. It's done at someone's house, or it's done at a centre or something like that. And for me, it should be a core part of education. So for me, it's, again, changing that narrative, using the research as a reason to change it, but then also using what's happening in our societies and our homes and our schools today, and how can we make sure we give every child the best start in life that we can. And music learning is part of that recipe.
Yeah, and even like you talk a little bit about lullabies and infant directed speech, like just from the very beginning of life, music is so critical. Could you maybe talk a little bit about the importance of lullaby?
Yeah. Well, it's lullabies, but basically it's motherese or parentese as well, and making sure there's variation in voice. One of the biggest heartbreaking things when I first started talking about lullabies is I'd do a presentation and I have people come and talk to me afterwards, which is wonderful. And I would have these fathers come up to me sort of, a little bit scared, and just said, have I hurt my child because I've never sung to them? And that's such a heartbreaking thing to me. Go, well, why haven't you sung to them? And it's because I don't think I have a good voice. It's like, that's not the point. The point is that the voice is, and I use a phrase in another book that I've written, which is, you are your child's favorite rock star. So that auditory signature, that is one of the first things that children and babies in particular understand about who are my carers, who do I trust, who will be there for me. And that comes firstly from an auditory signature. It comes from, what do I hear? Not the person who's holding me, or am I warm or am I fed? It's, who is this person? And they identify them through their voice to begin with. And song is our first language in our brain. Speech comes later. Song comes first. So using song as a way to connect with our baby for all sorts of, incredibly important reasons, as well as starting that speech journey, is absolutely vital. But again, we have these narratives around, well, I can't sing because I haven't got a good voice. And it's like, where have you got that idea from? It doesn't matter if you sing in tune or don't sing in tune. It's the fact that you are including a melody in your speech that the baby's brain can latch on to, go to, oh, this is one of my carers. I really like you. You make sure I'm always fed and warm and everything else. I feel safe with you. Yeah. I feel connected to you. And that's why it's so important to do. And a lot of the time we have these ideas that, oh, I can't sing well, so I'll put on the Wiggles, or I'll put on something else that will entertain. And the problem is, as we spoke about before, that auditory signature is compressed and it's missing information. And it's also not a real person. It's two-dimensional, whereas they need the three-dimensional human, that they can also feel the warmth and they can feel movement, but then they can identify through their voice. And singing is the quickest way to do it. If anything, what we should have done, and a lot of schools did, I know, is when we came back from COVID lockdowns, they would get the kids to sing together. And the reason they would do that is because as soon as they sing together, their heartbeats align and their body temperatures align. They actually physically feel connected to each other. And it's the same thing with babies. So song and the speech that comes from it is so incredibly important for our development. And we're losing that in the narrative of what is it to raise a child, a baby particularly. And we need to get that back into the narrative again and get people comfortable to do it.
That's right. So you heard that, SLPs. Definitely encourage your parents to be their child's favorite rock star, sing to your kids. And I feel like I was speaking with this evolutionary biologist recently, and she was talking about how the music, like lullaby, is something called a credible signal for the baby. So it's like signaling basically, oh, you're putting in this time and energy for me. This is how I know that you're like my caregiver, and someone important to me. And that's like, also with this release of oxytocin and all these like awesome bonding hormones and things like that, which is also something that drives interest and attention, which are foundational for learning how to parse sound and understanding what's important. And if you're replacing that again with a TV or something like that, it's like you're giving your power away in that way.
Yeah, well, you really are signaling, because you're very unlikely to sit with them to watch the television. Right. So you're not giving that signal of, you're taking the time with me. I love that as an analogy. That's a great one, of saying you're taking the time to spend with me, to do this thing, to connect with me. And that's all the children need to start with. They really just need, I am connected, I am safe. And
Yeah.
if we start with that as a foundation and use song as the vehicle to get there, then we've got, something great to build upon.
Yeah. And I love that you broke down the song speech distinction, like, because this is something I get all the time too, because, I'm always telling my parents to, get their kids into music, but they're like, oh, that's this separate thing, but really I've talked with a few people on here. It's like, there's not really a separation between music and speech when you're a kid. It's all organized sound. And, that like being able to distinguish, those two different categories doesn't come till later. So even like us talking about the music and speech distinction, like we should be, they should be together in a way. They're so overlapping.
Yeah, and we've got this idea that they are disconnected, and
Right.
that's really, really difficult for me, because inside the brain of a baby, they are intimately connected. And I think, again, it's that changing of it's a misunderstanding that we just need to correct and figure out how we can make sure that people, don't think that they are, oh, here's an extra thing I've got to do. It's like, no, integrate it with everything you are doing. Sing instructions. One of the best stories I had from a toddler who had terrible working memory, like could not, like, with, go and put your shoes on. We'll get halfway down the corridor and go, nope, can't remember what my instruction was. And I said, try singing it to them. So they'd sing it, and they got the first one done and back, and they went, oh, wow, that works. So they went, oh, hang on. If I put two of them together and I make them very sing-songy, what's going to happen? And of course, the child remembered them, and even to the point where they were singing it back. It's such a powerful tool. Even all the research sort of says right up to the age of 7, song is still very present within our brain as the mechanism that is helping us to learn how to speak. And I think that's why we should continue to do it. And I see it in literacy programs from 5 to 7-year-olds all the time. They include song.
Yeah.
And it's because it works. It's a really, really important thing. And I'm just wanting to help educators to just update their knowledge to know that and go, okay, this is another tool that I can use.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that speech therapists know a little bit. There's something called MIT, melodic intonation therapy, but it's mostly used, they use it in this very set setting with, aphasia patients, with broca's aphasia, and they can't get their words out. But it's like that, just using melody in speech intentionally, use that all the time. It's like such a great technique.
But it's also such a good technique to calm the body as well. So, and I'm imagining, this is only imagining because speech therapy is not my area, but learning anything or trying to do something that you're struggling with raises anxiety, raises that cortisol level, and song brings it down like incredibly quickly. So it's a fascinating and very important teaching technique for anything that we should use more often. But we have these ideas that we're not good enough singers, and it makes us vulnerable. And I think that's part of what I would love people to go, I'm not quite so vulnerable anymore, and I'm happy to give this a try and see what happens.
And I think it's so beautiful when you do, because there's certain times where I've just made a fool of myself as a therapist, and the kid I was working with was way better. Maybe they're showing me a game or something, and like it's a really, I think I see it on their face, like they light up when they're the one that's showing me something. When you flip the tables, there's this extra, like, I don't know, bond that you open up there. So yeah, even if you're not good at music, it's like be courageous enough to test it out. And it's scary, but
that's the thing. Everyone is good at music. We were born with our music processing network active. That's actually how we learn how to process sound. So this black and white, I'm good, I'm not, it's not that at all. It's actually just about going, if I put more melody in my speech, what would happen? Doesn't mean it's song. It's often halfway in between. It's that sing-songy thing that toddlers do a lot. But it's so interesting, professional speakers talk about that cadence in their voice and the using of the melody in their voice. So many people speak about how important the concepts of song, without calling it song, are for our human communication. So I think in anything we do, we need to just have it as another thing that we can use.
Beautiful. So we were talking a little bit about the melodic aspect. So, taking from music, trying to combine it with speech, we got melody. And there's also rhythm, which you talk a lot about, and I think is so great. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of rhythm, especially for reading? You have a lot of
so rhythm. we think of rhythm outside the body, clapping, playing a drum, something like that. But there are rhythms that are run our brain and also run our body. And I think we most notice them when they're not there. So think of a day when you had a terrible night's sleep. Maybe you didn't eat well, maybe not feeling great, maybe something emotional happened at home before you left and go to work. You can feel all of that. You can feel like this is an off day. You might drop things all the time. It's when the rhythms aren't working. And then sometimes we have amazing days where it's like, I am on fire today. I am just nailing everything. It's fantastic. And that's when all the rhythms are working. So rhythmic entrainment in the brain, which is getting the rhythms to work properly, is something that's exceedingly important all the way through our life, but is something that we often learn from outside the body to inside the body. So getting little toddlers to clap their hands together is so important, and getting them to be able to keep doing a beat. Because if we think about it, first of all, both sides of the brain have to be working and communicating, and they have to be doing it consistently. And that's one of the biggest things that the brain has to do when it comes to any activity. The hemispheres have to talk to each other. The next thing is they have to keep responding of how far do I put my hands out and how far do I move them in. And if anyone's watched a 5-year-old clap, you get one clap like this and then one clap like this and then one clap like that. It's all over the place. But it's about that consistency, because as soon as that consistency happens, that's when we actually know that that sensory triangle is functioning. And that's why people who teach in preschool are so important, that they keep doing all of these activities, because they're challenging that sensory triangle to get connected. Now, one of the best pieces of research that's come out of Nina's lab is around the fact that the connectivity of that triangle is a direct indicator of a typical reading journey, which would also be a typical speech journey after the age of 5. Now, that to me is extraordinary, to go, if we can watch a child clap and go, you're ready to read and you're not ready to read, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Because what it is outside the body, it's showing us what's happening inside the brain. So those rhythms at a very young age are incredibly important, but those rhythms continue, and they continue all the way through childhood and then into adulthood as well. And we challenge those rhythms sometimes by, like I said, lack of sleep, needing to go to the bathroom, not eating enough, eating too much. All of those sorts of things will challenge those rhythms through our body. But if we start to think of our body as a really big rhythm band, and one that we need to take care of all parts of it, it actually then helps us go, how can I work at an optimum level, or how can I parent at an optimum level, or how can I do anything I want to at that optimum level?
Yeah, that is so cool that you can use clapping as a way to, indicate, preparedness for reading. It's just amazing. I've worked with a lot of kids. I was trying to put this program together for using beatboxing for speech therapy, because you're on the beat. There's a lot of rhythm games too, which like you mentioned, some where you you're clapping and then you don't clap on one beat or one number, you skip something, and so there's a lot of that involved. And then you're also practicing speech sounds at the same time. But I did notice that that ability to synchronize to a beat, there's a pretty strong correlation, at least anecdotally, between that and in language and reading skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We did a test. Can I share a test we did? I went to a school, so in situ, which is really important. It's not in a lab or anything else like that. And we did sort of, from this research, I've created some couple of steps to go through to just watch video these kids and see them keeping beat. But what I got them to do, they said, we're going to split the classes. And I said, okay, when you split them, could you do them as the sort of top half age group of the year group, and then the bottom half, so the bottom 6 months, top 6 months? I just want to see if there's a difference. And we got these kids in, so one group after the other came in, and we were just watching them going, oh my goodness. It is so noticeable how much months make a difference at the age of 4, 5, and 6. It's still very, very important. But also we saw, and I didn't know these kids at all, but I would watch them on the video and go, okay, your problem readers are this one, this one, this one, and this one. They go, yep, that's our list. I said, I don't know these kids at all, but I can tell from the way that they keep beat and the way that they are able to monitor their sort of attention span. And the other one, which you just mentioned, which is inhibitory control, the ability to leave a beat out. I watch those 3 things and I can tell if this child needs further support when it comes to reading or not. And that to me is an incredible tool that I want to be used all over the world, because it will change the nature of reading development and even speech development for kids, and they will get the support they need earlier. And that's, to me, a win-win.
That's amazing. I love you. We're talking about it in the book, how you're kind of like this fortune teller going into the school, and they're like, how did you know you couldn't read? Yeah. But it's so great too, that not only is it important for early identification, but it can also be used to help train. And, when you do get better at music, your reading skills improve. Like that seems pretty incredible to me.
Yeah,
That's
and it
something
can happen reasonably quickly. I work in quite a number of schools. We're doing it in lots of different settings in lots of different ways. So it's not one specific thing. It's like, if we put music in this kind of way, what happens? And, within 3 months, we're seeing the teachers talking about the students being calmer, which is such an important thing, but also more willing to stick at something. So if they've got to a word that they're not quite sure, they'll stick with it for longer to see if they can figure it out, as opposed to going, I don't know what it is, I give up. Within 6 months, we start to see slight changes in sort of reading ability. Within 9 months, some of the kids are really shooting ahead. And then within 12 months, the kids who really were needing an enormous amount of support have come up by an impact factor that is really, really significant, higher than the kids who were going okay and just needed a little bit of help. So it can, as a complementary activity to good literacy development, it's a wonderful thing that needs to be done in all classrooms. And one of the best things we do, I love this, is the start of, we call it a literacy block, when they're doing their language learning. They do 10 minutes of musical activity to start with, and we talk about it as being warming up their brain for language. And the development they go through, the next sort of hour or so in their literacy block, the teachers have gone, the kids are getting to the end of the work I'm setting them, and I'm having to find other work for them to do. It just is such a powerful impact on that literacy and that speech development.
That's so amazing and so hopeful. Thank you for your work in this. I'm thinking back to when I was working in the schools. It was like, I don't remember, sometimes I push into the classrooms, like we sometimes do something like a literacy block, something similar, but never had kids finish early. Yeah, very cool. And so another thing that you talked about, which I thought was a really cool point with regards to rhythm, is how it can act as like kind of a social bonding mechanism. So they have, the babies that get bounced in time with the researcher, and then those babies are more likely to be helpful to that researcher. And I thought it was funny too, that if they're bounced off time, they don't care. They don't want to help the researcher.
It was so clear when they did it. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about this too in terms of social groups. Like SLPs will work on groups of kids on social skills, and that could be something that is, potentially very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that moving together, clapping together, it's hard with kids, but with adults, it's the reason why we love music festivals, and we bounce up and down together, and we're actually feeling more connected with those people. But with children, I think it's any movement that they do together. There's a game I love playing where all the kids sit cross-legged and their knees have to touch, and then they have a little like polished rock, and we sing a song, and they basically just have to pass the rock along the line. Now, it breaks down quite quickly, because if one person's out, the whole thing falls apart. But suddenly it becomes about this bonding activity of, we've got a challenge, we're singing together, so our heartbeats and body temperature is aligned, and we're doing something rhythmic, which is really pushing our brain to try really hard. So it's got all the parts, reward network, cognitive network, emotional network, all tied in. And whenever I do it with them, I could get them to do anything afterwards, and it would just be supercharged, because basically we've connected brain, body, people, and made the brain kind of like do some warm-ups, and then it's ready for some learning.
Beautiful. You talk about one classroom in the book where they had to do a rhythm activity before they got out to recess.
Yes.
And I think like building those things into your routine is probably pretty important for because it's easy to forget about this stuff. Like
it is, and it's easy. How we set it up and how we finish it, it's kind of like we're really good at writing the meat of a story, and then we don't think about how do we set up the listener, and then how do we exit the reader, for example, really well. And I think we could do more at either end of our lesson time that it could actually benefit it when they come back again. the activity, if I just explain what it was, it's really simple. You just get the kids all in a line together, all facing you, and it's a very simple challenge. I'm going to give you a beat, and I just want each person to clap as we go down. And when we get to the end, if we've all stayed in time, you can go out to recess. And they're like, oh, this is easy, miss. This is fine. I can do this. And they start, and by every single time, by the fifth kid, it falls apart. And they're like, oh, what happened there? And so they go, no, we can do this, and they try it again. And I love watching kids solve problems. So they'll always have one student who's less confident, and they'll go, oh, look, let you stand over here because you're near between two people who are really confident, and we'll help you out. Suddenly there's teamwork. Suddenly there's solving problems. Suddenly there's initiative. And the number of times I've done it, the bell's gone, and then you're like, nope, we're staying here till we can get this. That's social cohesion. That's commitment to it, to doing something. And I've got them to do a rhythm all the way down so that they feel physically connected to each other and they've lowered their stress level. So it's just, it's kind of like tick, 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 tick. It does all these wonderful things.
Yeah, I love that activity. I'm definitely going to use that. So yeah, Megan's asking if you have any ideas of what kinds of activities so that's an example of one of them. Are there any others that like kind of go-tos that you like to do as far as either rhythm or melody, any musical activity that could kind of
I think one of the ones that I've known, I do this with doing anything with pairs is really interesting. So the little things you used to see kids do, or you seen black and white photos, back in the 50s and 40s when they were doing clapping like this. So basically, I was talking about if any partner clapping is really good. I also have a lovely game. If I can try and it's a little song. You're happy for me to sing, it goes Guten Morgen, Guten Morgen, good morning, buenos dias, buongiorno, buongiorno. Very simple, but it's a call and response. So I teach them, they get in pairs and I go Guten Morgen, and then we shake hands, Guten Morgen, good morning, and then I get to them to a high five, buenos dias, and then they do a bow, buongiorno, but then I go 1, 2, 3, 4. And in that 4 counts, they have to find a new partner. And the reason why it's so good, they're singing, they're moving, they're having to do things. But because it's so quick, if there's any issues in the group or class where some kids don't like other kids, it takes all those away, because suddenly they're like, oh no, it's a game and it's a competition and I have to do it. And it really helps with that social cohesion. So if you've got a little bit of rumbling, of some issues in the class that they're sort of not gelling or getting along as well as they could, it's a really good song to do because it helps them out with that. Can I answer the white noise question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's go back to that.
From working with lots of researchers, my understanding is that white noise basically fills the sound to which the brain then switches off. But the problem is it's switching off to all sound. And that is not necessarily what we want. We want the ears to continue to filter sound for what's important and what's not important, or what I need to pay attention to and what I need to disregard. So the problem with white noise is while it might send us to sleep and it shuts down the auditory processing, it might, for babies, be not as effective at that time because it could be switching off the auditory processing when they need it to be on. So again, then I've read other research which says it's really good for adults. So I don't think it's a bad or a good. It's how is it being used and who is it being used with and what's potentially the positives and negatives of that use.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because like you're mentioning, at that time, it's so critical to like those early nutrients, those sonic nutrients, so to speak, are so formative, and it's kind of like stopping you from getting in the good nutrition if you're getting full of, I don't know, something else.
To use another analogy, there was a reality, I don't know why I remember this, but there was a reality TV show where they were all living in a house together, and one of the things they had to do is they put certain people into a white room, they wore white clothes, and they only ate white food. And basically they started to see they were fine for a little while, and then they started to be very lethargic, quite depressed. Even though they were getting all the food nutrients that they needed, they weren't feeling like they were thriving in any way, shape or form. And it's because of the lack of the sort of variety nutrient. And it makes me think about the ears. If we only listen to one type of music, then really all it really is white music. And what we need to listen to are lots of different types of music. Vocal indications are the same. Like a baby at night needs to be able to hear the garbage truck go past and go, oh, it's a loud sound. I don't know what it is, but it's okay. It's safe when it goes past me. They have to categorize it. But if there's white noise going, then they won't hear a lot of those sounds. So, but it is a balance. If you have a baby who is struggling to sleep, trumps speech development. You've got to get them to sleep first before you can do the speech development. So using it at that time might be a really good thing. So it is very much how is it being used, what's it being used for, and how is that person responding to it?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, Joan mentioned someone named Dr. Mersenik talking about noisy environments. I don't know him, but yeah.
It is a really big thing. Even in working environments where it's open plan, and we've found that productivity actually goes down because of the sound environments, and people are having to use headphones in order to be able to concentrate. So we need to think more about sound, our sound environments and how they're impacting us, the sound choices we're making, and particularly when we have children, what sound environments are we exposing them to, and are we giving them all the nutrients that we possibly could? It's the same thing with speech. We need to give children all the ranges of speech, not just happy speech, not just loving speech. They need to hear angry speech. They need to hear frustrated speech. They need to hear the whole spectrum in order to develop their iTunes library. And they need all of those things in there. And if there's extra sound, then that variety, gets changed a bit.
Yeah, Nina mentioned something about being on airplanes. They did this study and they found that, because airplanes are so noisy, it's actually not the food on the airplanes that doesn't taste good. It's the fact that you're bombarded with a lot of noise throughout the flight that's affecting your sense of taste. So it's just another anecdote about how all of this is connected. And
it's absolutely all connected. And the more we can do it with ourselves right from now, which is to go, all right, what sounds, when I hear a certain sound, what happens in my body? So I know I travel a lot and I go into airports, and what I find really hard is I found that my anxiety just raised a tiny bit. It was just noticeable that it was there. I go, what's doing that? I'm fine with traveling. I'm seasoned. I'm not worried about traveling at all. It's because as I walk into the environment in an airport, first of all the surfaces are hard and a lot of them are metal. So I'm hearing unnatural sounds. And then the other part is everyone's a little bit stressed at the airport. So everyone's voice is just that little bit louder and higher. So I was picking up on their anxiety from their voices. So, I now walk in and I make sure I've got headphones on when I get, as far as I can, and then come into a quiet spot to make sure that I remain well settled for the trip that I've got to take. But there's all those sorts of things. Certain sounds we love, certain sounds make us very irritated. Ask the question, why does it make me irritated? How could I change my own sound environment for my benefit?
Yeah, and we have to be in a lot of these noisy environments. I do notice that stress level going into airports, and it's sort of like evolutionarily speaking, like loud sounds. It's like avalanche or something, some potentially dangerous thing. So you're like, you're heightened. You're in your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Yeah. So Susan is asking about if there's any research on how this might apply to deaf or hard of hearing children.
Yep. Yes. So there is a big subset, which is all this auditory processing research, and then music as well. It's like, okay, well, how does it apply when the hearing ability is lost? Because the auditory processing is still working. And that's the fascinating part to it. So one of the interesting things is the child, so let's take two versions. If the child is profoundly deaf, is it a congenital? Were they born with it, or acquired? And did something happen? Did an accident happen? And the reason why that's important is because someone who is born with that deafness, the auditory processing is still working, but it's not getting fed as much information. So the other senses go, oh, there's some free real estate here, and they actually start taking over some of those areas as well. And it does if we've lost sight, the same sort of thing. The visual cortex goes not being used nearly as much anymore, so the auditory processing takes over. The acquired profound deafness is really interesting to know when it happened. So say, for example, it happened at the age of 1, prior to speech development, prior to hearing enough speech sounds to get the iTunes library really full, then they're going to have a different speech journey to someone who had an accident at 7, when a whole bunch of that speech was occurring and they've still got it. And the brain goes, oh, I've learned all this stuff. I can still keep doing that. And similarly, as we lose our hearing as we get older naturally, one of the things they've found is musically trained people are less like, they take longer to get a hearing aid and to recognize that they're losing their hearing, because the brain's filling in the gaps. It's going, I reckon it's that sound there. I'm just going to plug that one in for you, because the music training has helped them actually do that. So it has to do with the research, and then how much information has ended up in the auditory processing area and stuck. And then how do you keep working from there with helping them with speech, and then helping them potentially with reading, depending when it's happened as well. So there is a lot of research around it, but the sensory triangle is incredibly strong. Triangle is the strongest shape we have in nature. And the fact that we then have that in our brain is really important as well, because the sensory triangle will adjust and it will find different ways to make sure that, say, if you're challenging them to improve their speech, for example, it will start going, right, this is a good challenge for me. How am I going to try and make that better? And as I said, parts of the brain start to get commandeered for doing different sorts of activities. So you guys as speech therapists would know a lot more about that than me, but that's how I have observed it, particularly when we have kids in the school environment.
Very cool. Yeah, and Lisa's asking also about this. So this is regarding deaf individuals and children. What about rhythm and bouncing beats and things like that? Has there been any research done?
There has been, not nearly as much, which is really interesting, but the rhythm takes on almost a new and different way of working, particularly if you haven't got it coming through your ears. So the motor cortices goes, oh, there's some space in the auditory area, I'm going to take it over. So that concept of feeling rhythm and feeling the beat of speech even becomes a feeling part. So this is the sensory areas around our body are far more attuned to it, because the auditory can't necessarily hear it. So it's very, very important to keep rhythm going, but understanding that it's not necessarily being heard, but it's being felt. And so anything that can be felt on the body, it can be a connection with the body, or a feeling through a floor or a wall or a ball, anything like that, to help them feel that rhythm is really important. I first learned and started to understand this process when I had a profoundly deaf student who I then took to a concert hall, because I happened to know the orchestra and the percussionist, and she lay down next to the timpani. And because, of course, the sound goes into this wooden floor, she was in heaven. She hugged it. And it was like, and she said to me, I hear the music. But it started getting me really interested about, she wasn't hearing it, but she interpreted it as hearing, but it's coming through the body into the auditory processing, which then goes, this is what sound is.
Wow, that's a really cool anecdote. Yeah, Lisa's also, I guess this probably is the same thing, but, or a similar answer, but with blind individuals and cortical visual impairment, like, I guess the bigger question is like, how are you hearing music and processing rhythm? For a lot of those, like rhythm is, there's so many rhythms in the brain, like you were mentioning, that, and neural synchrony is a type of rhythm, brain waves, alpha, beta, theta, gamma, those are all,
they're all rhythms
working.
It's one of the biggest, the most important steps in this research is they've gone, as you just described them, they're quite dry and they don't mean very much. But when you suddenly go, but these are rhythms in the brain, suddenly it becomes that we as humans are making music, and we are going back to that really important fundamental part of what it is to be human, because we had music before we had speech. We had music before we had many other things, and it's a big evolutionary question. I don't know if the person you talked to spoke about it. Did music come first and then our brain grew, or did our brain go, I'm going to make this thing called music to help me grow? Like, it's chicken and egg kind of stuff. But it is really important that we understand that basically there are rhythms all over our bodies, and we can manipulate and change those rhythms. And if you think of them as rhythms, they can be anything. The big thing at the moment in psychology is reframing something. All that is changing the rhythm and the song underneath a thought. I think of it this way and it leads to this outcome. I'm going to think of it this way and it leads to a different outcome. That's a rhythm. That's a melody. That's a piece of music. It's just a different way to look at it.
What a cool reframe. I'm thinking now about like circadian rhythms and like how I guess it is like, our days are kind of a type of song and like kind of a cool reframe to think about it, versus like going into a day where you kind of have this lack of agency if you're just like going along with life and doing what you got to do. But if it's like a song that you're participating in this big rhythm and you have a part in playing that music, it's kind of beautiful.
Yeah. And that concept of I create my own song and my own rhythm through my day. Like I have more control of it than I think I do. Yeah. And that's really interesting. A lovely question to ask someone is, how was your day? If your day was a song, what song would it be?
Oh,
cool. Today it was like, We Are the Champions. I had the best day. Or today it was something else. So it's a really interesting, I've often done it in planes when I sit next to somebody and you say hello and it's like, I've got a funny question for you. And it either they look at me quite strangely or they go, I've never thought about it. Let me think. Because everyone loves music of a type that gets them into that, what is my favorite piece of music kind of thing, or what represents my day. It's a funny question, but something.
Well, let me flip that back on you. If today was a song.
It's feeling quite frenetic today. So what I'm hearing immediately in my head is some of the songs from Hamilton, the musical. So some of that sort of frenetic, really fast. So the rhythm of my day is really fast. So I can almost hear one of those really quick rap version parts of it. That is how my day is feeling. But also weirdly, at the end of it, I know it's the end of my Friday, and there's a joy that comes at the end of and that comes at the end of any of those songs as well. They're so clever to me musically. I find them really clever. So I'm not feeling frenetic in a bad way. I'm feeling frenetic that I'm going to operate at this speed today, but this will come to an end. And that really relaxed, almost. The next thing, honestly, that I hear in my head is Claire de Lune by Debussy. It's kind of like, it's just calm and it's lovely. And that's what's coming in my day. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, it's been really, really awesome making this little piece of music with you on this podcast. Beautiful. Yeah. Just before we wrap up, I guess there's a couple more questions. Anne Ramey is asking if you have any quick music resources that might have like a video modeling component. Anything come to mind off the top of the head?
I don't, but that's a good idea. I can make some. If you want to look at some of the work I do for advocacy, Bigger, Better Brains is where I do all my work for sharing the research in a way that people can put it out there. I do a lot of stuff on socials that talks about problems and things like that, but I like that idea. A couple of examples would be great.
Well, I can share one, and there's a free resource that I helped to make called Boots and Cats, which is the beatboxing, like a beatboxing for speech therapy resource. And it does have video modeling. You could see so for each sound, there's a different beatboxing pattern, and you could see the face and like the side profile and the front profile, and they have it like play along. Yeah. Is there anything that you're excited about in the near future, researching some new project?
I think I'm really interested in, at the moment, looking at how we can reframe this idea of you learn music to enhance you and then you go off and do enhanced things. So looking at a lot of the research, which is coming out a lot now, which is musically trained people who then go on to do something else, but then can reflect on what they learned in the music learning process that they now use somewhere else. And I'm so interested in that idea that I've taught, I think I tried to add it up vaguely the other day, and I've taught at least 12,000 students under the age of 18.
Wow.
Very few. I could name on two hands the number who've gone off and done music, but I know of so many of them that are doing extraordinary things out in the world. And I think what I'm excited about is maybe delving into that question of how did learning music help you do the thing you do now so well? Like
cool.
How do you connect those two things together? And I'm really excited about asking that question and seeing what comes out. I don't actually know what the answers are, but I think so many people have learnt music, and I know I've taught so many of them. And I know, and when I've talked to them randomly and said, I'm thinking of this big question, they go, oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm a stockbroker. And you know what? I don't watch the numbers. I listen to the patterns that are happening and he says, I watch this screen and I see and I hear patterns of what's happening. And I know one of my superpowers is I know exactly when to sell or buy because I can see the patterns as if they're music. And it's like, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really excited about that idea of finding that asking a question that very few people have been asked before.
Oh,
And
that's so
seeing what
exciting.
that will be.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, you do see, I feel like with music, that it is a frame, like musical thinking, kind of like mathematical thinking, is a frame through which you can see a lot of problems in a very different way. At least that's been true in my life as well. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, it seems like that's kind of what you've done with yours as well, being like a trained musician who's like done all these cool things. Um,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I think and I can relate to what happens for me when I read the music or I had a hard problem and I go, oh, but this is like when you have a hard thing you have to practice. It's the same concept. So I'm just interested in seeing if my experience and your experience are unique, or
Mm.
if there are some people who have some really interesting ways of connecting their music learning with the thing that they're doing today, and whatever that might be.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Collins. You're an inspiration. We really appreciate your
Thank you.
expertise. And, if people want to get involved, is there a place they can find you? Something you
Yes.
want to link people to?
Yes,
Any
as I said,
conclusions?
bigger, better brains.
Okay.
Follow us on socials, particularly that's where we put most of our stuff out. And I do personally do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. Just look for Dr. Anita Collins and sharing. Bigger, better brains is sort of my stuff I do for music teachers, but I do a lot of stuff when it comes to presenting. I'm coming over to the US in July. I'm very excited about coming to present at a conference there and wanting to come more back to the US. I was there just before COVID and then I haven't got to come back since. So I'm really excited to coming back and working with all sorts of people in the US as well. So yeah, just Bigger Better Brains or Dr. Anita Collins, and I'd love to see lots of people there so that you can follow in what I do and I can find out more about how I can help you.
Oh, I'll definitely be there. That sounds awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm getting some great comments. This was great. Thank you both greatly. Yeah. Thanks everyone for being here and hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care.